A millionaire's daughter lay in a coma. For days, machines beeped and doctors whispered. Specialists came from across the country. No one could wake her. But then, a blind German shepherd with a yellow blindfold was led into her hospital room. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply laid his head on her chest. The room fell silent. And then something impossible happened. Her lips moved. Her fingers twitched. And a single word broke through the quiet. Home. This isn't just a story, it's a sign. The sky over Whispering Pines, Tennessee, hung low and gray that morning, like a wool blanket pulled tight over the town. A soft drizzle fell, turning sidewalks to mirrors and streets to slow rivers. October had arrived without fanfare, just a persistent chill in the bones and the scent of damp earth clinging to the pines. Outside Whispering Pines Elementary School, the yellow bus had just pulled away, spitting a fine mist from its tires. Children waved and called to one another, laughter floating in the air, until a single scream pierced the chatter. Savannah Reed lay on the concrete near the school gate, motionless. She was 10 years old, tall for her age, with long auburn hair that refused to stay tied, and eyes the color of stormy seas. Her laugh used to echo through the school hallways, bright and quick, but her world had gone silent. It happened without warning. One moment she was tying her shoelace, the next her body collapsed, lifeless, like a puppet with its strings cut. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Dr. Grant Reed stood beside his daughter's hospital bed now, barely breathing. Grant was a man of reputation, one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in Tennessee. In his early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, and always sharply dressed in dark suits or scrubs, he was the kind of man whose presence quieted rooms. But beneath the calm veneer was a soul worn thin. Since his wife's death 3 years ago, a car accident he blamed himself for, Grant had buried himself in work, thinking money and medicine could fix what grief had broken. He built operating rooms that saved lives, but his own daughter lay unreachable. Savannah hadn't woken for 4 days. Machines surrounded her like silent sentinels, monitoring heart rate, oxygen, brain activity. Tubes fed her. Needles fed the tubes. And Grant, who had guided thousands of hands through open-heart surgery, sat powerless beside her. He didn't leave her side, not even once. Nurses came and went. Specialists flew in, their brows furrowed, offering theories and tests. Acute neurological shutdown, one said. Could be autoimmune, said another, but nothing conclusive, and nothing helped. Across town, nestled behind a rusted white gate and 2 crumbling oaks, sat the Whispering Pines Children's Shelter. The rain hadn't yet reached here, but the wind rattled the windows like nervous fingers tapping. In the far back room, a boy stood facing the wall, unmoving. His name was Micah Brooks, 11 years old. Thin, small-boned, with curly black hair cropped short and skin the warm brown of autumn bark. His eyes were wide, deep, and alert. But his lips rarely moved. Not since the night his house burned down 3 years ago, taking both his parents. No one knew exactly what he saw that night, but since then, Micah hadn't spoken a word. He was polite, gentle, quiet. Most assumed he was mute by choice. The shelter's staff tried speech therapy, but nothing worked. Only one. Soul truly got through to him. Dusty. The German shepherd was 6 years old. His fur was silvered with black and gray, his eyes clouded white with blindness. He wore a bright yellow blindfold tied carefully behind his ears, more symbolic than functional now, a warning to strangers and a comfort to Micah. Dusty had once belonged to a retired veteran who passed away, and the shelter had taken him in. No one thought the blind dog would connect with anyone, until Micah approached him one day, placed a hand on his head, and whispered something. From that day on, they became inseparable. Dusty didn't need sight. He followed Micah's scent, steps, and heartbeat. That afternoon, as the shelter's old television sputtered out local news, Micah sat on the floor next to Dusty. A nurse on the screen said something about a girl who collapsed near the school. Savannah Reed, the anchor said, showing a photo, a bright-eyed girl with paint on her cheeks and wild red hair. Micah tilted his head. He stared, unmoving. Dusty's ears perked. Then he stood up. His nose lifted to the air. Though blind, Dusty could feel something shift, like a frequency humans couldn't hear but pulsed through the air. He sniffed once, twice, then faced the window. A soft growl rumbled in his throat, not of threat, but of knowing. Micah rose slowly and followed Dusty's gaze. The rain had reached the shelter now, whispering against the windows like a ghost come knocking. Dusty nudged the door gently with his snout. Something had begun. The rain had softened to a whisper by midnight, mist curling like breath against the windows of the Whispering Pines Children's Shelter. The town had settled into quiet slumber, the kind that made the sound of one footstep feel like thunder. But in the dimly lit hallway near the back exit, 11-year-old Micah Brooks moved like a shadow. His small frame was wrapped in a navy windbreaker, 2 sizes too large, the sleeves reaching past his wrists. He moved with careful intention, holding a frayed yellow leash in one hand. At the end of it padded Dusty, the blind German shepherd, silent and sure. The dog didn't stumble or hesitate, as though something deep inside was guiding him more accurately than sight ever could. They reached the exit door. Micah looked over his shoulder once. No sound, no movement. He pulled the latch and slipped into the night. Outside, the air was cool, wet, and filled with pine. The roads shimmered from earlier rain, and the town's modest skyline, church steeples, grocery store signs, the green cross of the pharmacy, glowed faintly under cloud-choked moonlight. The hospital stood on a hill at the town's edge, its lights bright like stars that refused to sleep. It took Micah over an hour to walk there, his sneakers soaked through, Dusty's fur beaded with dew. Yet the boy never stopped. Every so often, Dusty would pause, lift his head, and pull gently to the right, like a compass realigning itself. At the hospital's rear entrance, a tall man with a clipboard glanced up from his security booth. He was in his 50s, white-haired, broad-chested, with a strong chin and eyes that had once been kind but now held little trust. His name tag read, Charles Rayner. Charles had worked night security at Whispering Pines General for nearly a decade. Since his daughter died of leukemia, he hadn't been the same. Kindness still lingered in his eyes, but it came slow, guarded. He stepped out as Micah approached. "Hey, buddy," Charles said cautiously, holding up a hand. "It's late. You okay?" Micah didn't answer. He held up a folded newspaper clipping from the shelter, showing Savannah's photo and headline. His other hand gently tapped Dusty's head. The dog, wearing his signature yellow blindfold, stood perfectly still. Charles looked at the paper, then back at the boy. "You know her?" Micah nodded. "You family?" Micah shook his head. Charles frowned. His gut said to turn the boy away. Hospital rules were clear. No unscheduled visitors, especially not children in the middle of the night. But something about the boy's eyes, how wide and pleading they were, and that dog. That dog didn't flinch, didn't bark, didn't even sniff around like others did. He just waited. Charles sighed. "Wait here," he muttered and buzzed the door open. "Just don't cause trouble." Micah slipped inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above as he moved down long, sterile corridors. Nurses and doctors passed him, but none stopped him. Perhaps they assumed someone else had cleared him. Perhaps it was the way Dusty moved with certainty, tail still, ears forward, steps unwavering, that made them trust. Eventually, they reached the elevator. Dusty nosed the bottom button gently. They ascended in silence. The ICU ward was quiet, but not asleep. Machines beeped in calm rhythm. Nurses murmured behind glass doors. A janitor swept methodically near the end of the hallway, his headphones in, oblivious. Room 317. Micah hesitated at the door. Inside, through the small pane of glass, he saw her, Savannah, pale, still, with wires attached to her small chest and arms. Her red hair fanned across the pillow like a memory of autumn. The door creaked open. Dr. Grant Reed stirred in his chair beside the bed, eyes bloodshot, face unshaven. He hadn't changed clothes in 2 days, still in charcoal slacks and a rumpled blue shirt. He looked up, startled, as Micah and Dusty entered. "Who? What? How did you get in here?" Grant stood abruptly, his voice sharper than intended. Micah stepped back slightly, unsure, but Dusty kept walking forward. The dog stopped at Savannah's bedside, his nose trembling. Then slowly he lifted one paw and placed it softly on the edge of her blanket. Grant's anger froze mid-breath. Dusty leaned in closer, nose brushing Savannah's small fingers. He did not bark. He did not move again. He simply stayed. Savannah's heart monitor beeped. Steady. But Grant could swear the rhythm shifted, just a hair, softer, more present. "What is this?" he murmured. Micah, trembling slightly now, reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. With careful hands, he took the pen clipped to the side table and began to write. His handwriting was rough, but clear. "She hears, but she's afraid to come back." Grant stared at the message. What do you mean?" Micah pointed to Savannah, then to his heart, then to Grant. He wrote again. "She needs your voice, not machines." Grant's throat tightened. "Who are you?" Micah didn't answer. Dusty slowly laid down beside Savannah's bed, his head resting against her mattress. His body didn't move, but his ears stayed alert, as though listening to something deeper than sound. Grant exhaled. He looked at this boy, small, soaked, silent, and this blind dog who somehow found his way to this room without misstep. Something shifted in him. He sat back in the chair. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice softer now. "But I don't think I'll ask you to leave." Micah smiled faintly and sat down on the floor next to Dusty. Morning broke like a whisper through the hospital blinds, casting long gold lines across Savannah's bed. The air inside room 317 was still, humming only with the mechanical rhythm of machines and the soft, steady exhale of the sleeping girl. Dr. Grant Reed hadn't slept. He sat slouched in the armchair beside his daughter, eyes dry and burning, a 3-day stubble darkening his square jaw. Outside, the world stirred with Monday morning. Nurses exchanged shift updates. A cafeteria worker with cinnamon-colored skin and a kind heart named Trina Wallace, mid-40s, with a wide build and a slow, deliberate way of walking, rolled her breakfast cart past ICU, humming gospel under her breath. She gave Grant a sympathetic smile. "Still no change?" she asked softly. Grant shook his head. "Not yet." Trina nodded and pushed on. Inside the room, Grant stared at Savannah's pale face, her lashes unmoving. Her chest rose and fell beneath the pink cartoon blanket she once adored. Beside her, Dusty lay quietly. The dog had not moved since Micah left. Micah. The boy had been escorted out earlier that morning by Isaiah Lorne, the director of Whispering Pines Children's Shelter. Isaiah was in his early 50s, tall and slender, with tightly coiled silver hair and eyes that always seemed to know more than they said. His pressed gray coat and wire-rimmed glasses gave him a scholarly air. But there was an old sadness behind his calm, one shaped by years of working with abandoned children. Isaiah had arrived at the hospital with purposeful steps and a quiet voice. "I'm sorry he ran off," he'd said to Grant in the hallway. "Micah doesn't usually do that, but when that boy feels something, he follows it." Grant had been too tired to argue. "I didn't call security." "I know, and I thank you for that." Now, alone in the room again, Grant looked at Dusty. The dog's ears didn't twitch. His yellow blindfold was damp from morning dew, but he was still. So still it was as if he were waiting on something ancient to return. Grant leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. His hands trembled slightly as he looked at his daughter. "You always asked me to tell you stories," he whispered, "but I never had time, never the right ones." His voice cracked. The sound in the room didn't change, but Savannah's pulse monitor beeped a little stronger. Grant swallowed. There had been a song. His late wife Hannah had sung it to Savannah when she was small. Hannah had been his opposite, warm, artistic, with chestnut waves that always smelled like lavender, and a voice soft enough to calm any storm. She'd died 3 years ago in a crash on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, trying to get to Savannah's school play on time. Grant hadn't let himself listen to music since. He hadn't even remembered the lyrics, until now. "There's light in the shadows," he whispered, barely audible. "And stars in the rain." He stopped. His eyes stung. Dusty lifted his head. Grant cleared his throat. "Hold on, little dreamer. You'll fly once again." At that moment, the monitor next to Savannah's bed gave a single, unusual blip. Nurse Lena Carver, a small framed woman in her early 30s with short red hair and alert eyes, passed the doorway and froze. She had been tending to ICU patients for 5 years and trusted machines more than words. But something about this room always felt different since the boy and the dog arrived. She stepped in. "Dr. Reed?" she asked carefully. Grant glanced back. "She's reacting," Lena said. "Not just vitals? Look." She pointed to Savannah's fingers. Barely, just barely, they twitched. Grant stood slowly, not daring to breathe. Is it reflex?" Lena shook her head. "It's voluntary." Dusty stood, moving closer, and nudged Savannah's hand. His blind eyes turned upward as though he could feel what others could not. Grant turned back toward his daughter and sat down again. He looked at the ceiling, then back at her. "I used to hum it while you fell asleep," he said softly. "I was afraid of singing in front of people, but not you." Then he began again, voice trembling, each note heavy with years of silence. "There's light in the shadows and stars in the rain." Savannah's heart monitor picked up another beat. Stronger. Real. Lena whispered, "She's coming back." Dusty let out a slow exhale and laid his head back down. Across town, Isaiah walked Micah back to the shelter. They moved in silence through the fog that still clung to the edges of the road. Micah, usually expressionless, kept looking over his shoulder toward the hospital. "He stayed," Isaiah said, nodding. "The dog?" Micah nodded. "You feel something, don't you?" Micah stopped walking and turned to face him. Slowly, he pressed one hand against his chest, then extended it outward toward the hospital, then brought it back again. Isaiah exhaled slowly. "You're telling me she feels it too?" Micah gave a single nod. The fourth night fell with a hush over Whispering Pines, as if the whole town paused to listen. Fog rolled low across the streets, soft and thick like breath caught in winter. The hospital windows glowed with quiet light, and in room 317, something had shifted, not loud or sudden, but steady and real. Savannah's hand had moved again. Dr. Grant Reed stood beside her bed, not with disbelief this time, but with a cautious kind of hope. Her fingers had twitched more than once now, and just an hour ago, her lips parted as though trying to shape sound. There had been no words, but there was will. Across from him, Nurse Lena Carver adjusted the IV drip. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her brow was furrowed, not in worry, but in awe. She'd never seen anything like this. And the strangest part? Savannah's responsiveness always increased when that blind dog was near. Dusty, 6 years old, blind since birth, with a yellow blindfold tied carefully behind his ears, lay curled on the floor near Savannah's bed. His ears stayed perked, though his eyes saw nothing. Each night, he'd press his head gently against the mattress and listen, and each night, the monitors responded. Grant turned toward the doorway, where Dr. Elise Harmon had just entered. She was the hospital's lead pediatric neurologist, an elegant woman in her mid-40s, sharp-boned with short ash blonde hair always tucked behind one ear. Reserved by nature, Dr. Harmon was known for her meticulous logic and measured tone, shaped by years of working in elite East Coast hospitals before settling in Tennessee for a quieter life after her own daughter had passed from complications of epilepsy. She looked down at the chart in her hands, then back at Savannah. "We've ruled out every known anomaly," she said, voice low. "Nothing explains this kind of change." Grant didn't speak. He kept his hand resting on Savannah's. "I'm not asking you to believe in miracles," Harmon added after a pause. "But I do believe something's reaching her." Grant exhaled. "I think it's time we bring the boy back." The next morning, Isaiah Lorne received the call while preparing breakfast for the children at the shelter. He always cooked on Thursdays, a tradition born from guilt and gratitude. That morning, as bacon sizzled and orange juice was poured, he walked quietly to the room where Micah sat cross-legged on the floor, Dusty's empty collar in his lap. Isaiah crouched beside him. "They want you to come back," he said softly. "The doctor asked for you." Micah looked up, eyes wide. "You ready?" Micah didn't nod, but he stood. When Micah returned to room 317, the moment was still. Savannah lay as before, but the change in the air was almost tangible. Dusty rose from his spot and walked to the boy immediately. No leash, no guide, just presence. Grant turned, exhausted, yet visibly moved. "Thank you," he said. Micah looked at Savannah, then stepped closer. The girl's fingers shifted slightly, just once. Dusty let out a soft whine. Micah reached into his pocket and retrieved a pencil. There was no paper this time, so he moved to the bedside monitor and traced a single word across its screen, careful not to smudge. Home. Then, for the first time in nearly 3 years, he whispered the word aloud. Home. His voice was raspy, quiet, but unmistakable. Lena froze. Elise blinked. Grant choked on a breath. Savannah's lips parted. Her heart monitor spiked slightly. A murmur passed through her throat. Dusty sat beside Micah, lifting his nose to the ceiling. He tilted his head just slightly, then walked slowly toward the window. He sat, stared, waited. Later that evening, the whispers spread. A girl waking without medication. A mute boy who spoke one word. A blind dog who never left her side. A local journalist, Bryce Eaton, caught wind of the story from a hospital receptionist. Bryce was in his early 30s, dressed too formally for a small-town paper, with dark-rimmed glasses and a camera always slung around his neck. He arrived at the hospital with questions and a notepad. He wasn't alone. More reporters came. Local news vans parked outside. Grant declined interviews, but one photo still slipped through. A shot of Micah sitting beside Savannah, Dusty's head resting on the bed. That photo spread. The world began to wonder. Who was the boy who found her? And how did a blind dog know what even machines couldn't? By the 5th night, Dusty had developed a new routine. As the clock neared midnight, he would rise from Savannah's bedside, walk to the window, and lift his head. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He just stared, ears alert, as if waiting. Nurse Lena noted it in the chart. Dusty sees something, she wrote. We don't know what. Morning came to Whispering Pines wrapped in gold, not gray. Sunlight spilled across the hospital hallway, warming the cold tile floors and making even the faintest reflections shimmer like water. Inside room 317, the light landed softly on a little girl's face. Savannah Reed opened her eyes. Her lashes fluttered first. Then her lips parted with a breath that felt like the first one in days. Her body was still weak, her arms limp, her legs unmoving, but her eyes were awake, and they searched the room as if she had returned from a very far place. Beside her, Grant sat frozen in disbelief. His jaw dropped, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Then, emotion hit him like a wave. He rose to his knees, took her hand in both of his, and whispered her name again and again like a prayer. Savannah. Sweetheart. I'm here. Her lips trembled, and then she whispered hoarsely, Where's the blind dog? Grant blinked, unable to hold back the tears. He's right here, he said. Across the room, Dusty lay curled at the base of the window, head resting on Micah's leg. The boy sat cross-legged, back against the wall, his eyes red from exhaustion, but full of something else, something softer. Hope. Savannah's eyes turned to him. And the boy, the one who didn't talk, he was there, in my dream. He held my hand. Micah didn't say anything, but Dusty rose, padded over to her bedside, and gently placed his head on her arm. Savannah's fingers curled around his fur. There was a yellow light, she said. It followed me. The dog, he guarded the edge of the darkness, and the boy whispered things I couldn't hear. But I wasn't scared. Grant wiped his eyes, unable to speak. Nurse Lena Carver entered then, holding a tray of soft food and water. When she saw Savannah awake, she dropped the tray. The plastic cup bounced and rolled beneath the bed. She clapped a hand over her mouth. Dr. Elise Harmon followed right behind her and froze. She's awake, Lena whispered. Elise moved slowly to the bedside. Her clinical mind clicked through explanations. The monitors showed improvement, yes, but they didn't explain this. Savannah was lucid, aware, responding. None of it lined up with the science. She asked for the dog, Grant said, voice unsteady. Elise looked at Dusty, then at Micah, then back at Savannah. The girl smiled. 2 weeks later, on a bright November afternoon, the hospital held a quiet ceremony. There were no press cameras, no formal speeches, just a few doctors, nurses, and Isaiah Lorne standing beside Grant and the children. Savannah had walked 20 feet that morning with help from a walker. She wore a soft yellow sweater, and her red hair was tied back with a ribbon. Micah stood beside her, now speaking in full sentences, albeit slowly. He didn't say much, but when he did, people listened, and Dusty, still blind, now wore a new yellow blindfold with his name stitched, carefully across the side. He sat between the children like a sentinel made of fur and silence. Isaiah placed a gentle hand on Grant's shoulder. "You sure about this?" he asked. Grant smiled, faint but sure. "I've never been more certain." That evening, papers were signed. Custody was transferred. Whispering Pines Children's Shelter said goodbye to Micah with teary eyes and open arms. And by the time the stars came out, a new family had quietly formed in the old white farmhouse on the hill just outside town. Months later, construction began on a new center, Grant's idea, funded from his own savings and through private donations that had poured in after Savannah's story was shared by the local news. The name painted in soft blue letters above the entrance was simple and clear: the Yellow Light Center. Its mission was just as clear: a therapy and healing center for children recovering from trauma, grief, or emotional injury. Music rooms lined the walls. A dog-assisted therapy wing filled the back. No fancy monitors. No machines with blinking lights. Just stories, songs, silence, and dogs. At the center of it all was Dusty. Now 8 years old, the blind German shepherd became a legend among the children. Some drew pictures of him with wings. Others said he could hear things even God whispered. He moved slowly, always calm, always patient. When a child wept in the corner, Dusty went to them first. No training had taught him that. He simply knew. One spring afternoon, a visitor came to the center. A young volunteer named Rebecca Lang, 22, a college student majoring in child psychology. She had long brown braids, freckles across her nose, and a soft voice that made children lean in close. She met Micah in the music room. He was helping Savannah tune a small ukulele. "You're the boy in the story," she said softly. Micah looked at her. "You found her." He didn't answer immediately. Then, with a quiet smile, he said, "No, she found herself. I just reminded her she wasn't alone." Rebecca blinked, then scribbled something in her journal. That evening, Micah read his first story aloud to the group. It was a simple tale about a lost fox and a blind crow who guarded her. His voice was still cautious, like a bird unsure of its wings. But it carried. And when he finished, the children clapped. Savannah beamed beside him. Dusty lay at the center's front porch that night, head resting on his paws. The porch light buzzed quietly above him. He didn't stir, didn't look, but his head tilted gently and his ears perked, as if something soft, something invisible, had passed by and whispered back, "You did it." Sometimes, the light we need most doesn't come from medicine or machines. It comes from a whisper in the dark, a hand reaching out, a blind dog lying quietly beside a child who refuses to give up. Dusty never saw with his eyes, but he saw with something deeper. And Micah, a boy who couldn't speak, reminded the world that silence doesn't mean absence. What happened in that room wasn't science. It wasn't coincidence. It was grace. We believe that miracles still happen, not with thunder and lightning, but through love, faith, and those brave enough to stay when others walk away. Maybe God doesn't always speak in loud voices. Maybe sometimes He sends us a child, or a dog, or a song from the past. If you believe in second chances, in quiet miracles, in the power of faith, then this story is for you. If you felt something watching this, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment below and type Amen if you believe God still works in mysterious ways. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and may God bless everyone who watches this video. Amen.